All right. So we have a couple of people in here. Everyone has muted their mics. Perfect. Here we go. I'm just aligning my my notes here a little bit. So, Bianca, please let people in the waiting room while I get started. So, yeah, welcome again to another workshop session by SUP 46. And I'm very happy to continue on the topic of leadership. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the leadership part today. Last time we talked in general about how to be open to different perspectives and so on, and different leadership types. Now we're going to talk about a very important part of leadership, which is communication and internal communication. So I am very happy to have Daniel here today, someone I've worked with and respect a lot, and I'm looking forward to getting your insights on this topic. Thank you guys for joining this session. And as well, always the purpose of those sessions is to give you, as an entrepreneur and startup founder, quick and tangible advice on how to improve your startup journey. So as always, 45-minute session plus 15 minutes Q&A. And please keep your mics on mute. And for our enjoyment, please turn on your webcams. It's way more fun. Learn from Dan. He's a great guy and very good at turning on his webcam. So much appreciated. So we'll add the recordings afterwards to our internal library. And I want to give a special welcome to our friends from Scania and Stockholm Scale-Up Program. Amazing entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs joining us today to hear about internal leadership. And also thanks to Bianca for coordinating. And we'll start letting people into the lobby, late arrivals. And when the session is over and we're going into the Q&A, I will trigger a survey, which we would be really happy for you to answer. Just a couple of quick questions, just to know how we're doing. What do you think about the workshops? And yeah, what type of topics do you want to hear going forward? So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Daniel Ekstam, with a lot of experience of leadership positions in a fast-paced startup environment. And you've been involved in many different types of scenarios and sessions. I've seen you personally get squeezed between the board, the CEO, and the CTO, and manage that with great progress. So there's a bunch of lessons that I've seen you navigate personally, and I hope we can shine some light on that during this session. And you're passionate about making things right and taking things forward. So I'm gonna leave the mic to you, and welcome, Daniel. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. But yeah, that's exactly true. I've been squeezed in the middle for quite some years, and kind of enjoy it, being there, sorting things out. We're going to get a bit more into that exactly later on. But as we said, me and Sebastian has worked together. We've had some great times, and not only me, but together walked through some struggles and come out on the other side. So it's all a learning experience, not only in startups, but maybe the learning experience is a bit harder and faster in startups than in other situations. But yeah, welcome. Today we're going to talk about aligning communication, and why I'm using the word aligning is because that's what it's all about. In any company, in any size of organization, and anything, it's about aligning. Are we running in the right direction? Or maybe more important, are we running in the same direction? And that starts with communication. But It starts with internal communication. It starts with how you as a team, as a group, as an organization talk internally. But actually, as a small company and as a small business or as a startup, but maybe even bigger, it starts with your communication as a leader. Before you can start learning others on how to communicate, before you can wellly align a larger organization, you need to align your own communication. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about you as a leader in that respect. We're going to talk about your communication skills, and we're going to talk about your behavioral skills in alignment with your communication. So again, alignment is a key here. What we are not going to talk about today, to be super clear about that, we're not going to talk about the vision. We're not going to talk about the mission. We're not going to talk about North Stars or anything like that. And for the fun of it, we're not going to talk about sustainability policies or product features today, as I know a lot of startups, and every startup I've been involved in or guested at have these topics. But we're not going to touch on them today. We're going to stick to alignment of communication. I'm going to try to give you a little small toolbox to help you answer the questions: who do you want to be as a leader? And who are you as a leader? Those necessarily at the beginning of entrepreneurship or leadership or anything, or in the middle if you haven't even thought about it, or there's a gap there. And these small tools and the toolbox that I hope give to you today will kind of put that gap together and also help you form a path, like who do you want to be as a leader and becoming that leader, so to speak, with communication and alignment here as the main focus of today. I'm going to start off, before we look at the agenda, I'm going to give you a little statement here, that our brain focuses around thoughts that is repeated to it. With that, I'm saying that we learn by repetition and we create habits by repetition. And habits is an important thing as an entrepreneur and as a high performance person. And our habits and our learnings become our autopilot, our first in mind, so to speak, especially when things get tough or when things need to go fast. So I'm going to leave that there for now. Let's take a look at the agenda. So the impact of your communication, we're going to go through that. And I call this the perspective, why your communication impacts so hard and how it impacts. We're going to talk about how much to talk about what in the form of the now, the next, and the future, how to kind of categorize those things and how to put them in perspective to your team and to your group. We're also going to talk about the impact of the gap between your walk and your talk, meaning the walk being your behavioral skills that I mentioned earlier, how the body language that you have and how you act and react to things. And your talk, well, what you're talking about and what you're saying. So that gap between them two, we're going to talk about how that can impact or positively and negatively. I call that the alignment. And then I'm going to briefly introduce you to something called the CATCH framework, a framework that I've put together through my years of experience that helped me and something I use with a lot of my teams. Helps me kind of identify weaknesses and strengths in my communication, and I've also put it to test in groups, and you can even have your team use that framework on you as a leadership or as a leadership group. And I call those the ingredients. Then, as Sebastian said, we're going to have a quick Q&A at the end. But before we talk about you and your leadership and your communication, let's talk about me for a brief little second. My main drive is to help people extract potential. I love helping people extract their potential. I'm super passionate about optimizing stuff. I don't like doing things unnecessarily. I don't like spending time on things that can be automated or can be, taken out of the process or the system. I'm a creative soul. I call myself a solutionist. I don't know even if that is a word, but I like it.
It is now.
It is now, and it fits my mindset. I have just over 6 years of experience in operational roles in startups and in e-commerce. And as Sebastian said, I've been bang in the middle of visionary founders and extremely highly productive people, and then also the operational floor or the operational organization. And sitting there in the middle really requires great communication and understanding and perspectives, as you mentioned before. I have experience of designing, sourcing, and launching my own brand and my own products as an e-commerce. And before I even went into any of these two above, I have over a decade as technician and project manager in TV, film, and event industry. Communication have been a very big success factor in my career and in my whatever I do, but it has also been actually one of the greatest failures I have experienced as a leader. So one of the few biggest mistakes or few biggest failures I've experienced has actually been one core reason: bad communication. So that's why I've kind of doubled down on this subject and spent a lot of time kind of refining my own communication and my own style in that. So let's get into it. The impact of your communication, the perspective. Leaders spend about 80% of their workday communicating. Any leader, top, middle, as soon as you're leading other people, you spend about 80% of your workday communicating. We look at leadership, especially maybe in tech and in startups, about task, time, and cost management. This is what we do, yes. We manage people's tasks, we manage people's time, and we look at costs. But the biggest fuck-ups and the biggest mistakes and the biggest everything about all these three is bad communication. We want to maximize outcome of tasks. We want to do it in the shortest amount of time, and we want to do it to the lowest cost. And the biggest fuck-up of all three, bad communication. So I've taken those three away. I don't see it as that I do task management, time management, or cost management as the first approach. I see it as communication management. How am I better at communication? How do I get through earlier, clearer, better? Then I automatically become better at time, task, and cost management. Funny enough, if you put the word better in front of task, time, and cost management, you pretty much have the USP of any SaaS company out there at the moment. So maybe there should be more communication SaaS companies. I don't know, but it's pretty fun when I walked through this and looked at it in that perspective. Impact of bad communication. Tasks. If you have unclear specifications, you need to redo things. Too many meetings about the same thing. And what does that implicate? More time. Redoing tasks takes double the time or even more. I would suggest even more than double the time. Too many meetings slow down productivity, and eventually we miss deadlines. And what does missing deadlines mean? Yeah, well, cost. Missing deadlines costs money and costs clients, maybe. And then something we haven't talked about yet is people. Like redoing the same task multiple times because of bad specifications, because of bad communication, or because of we don't really understand what the leadership wants, that's pretty demotivating for people. Most people actually like to be good at their job and finishing tasks and move forward. And unclear expectations, which is communication again, causes stress and also is demotivating, and you will lose people. And if you lose people, the loop goes back. You can't do as many tasks, you can't do it in the quick time, and it will cost more money because you need to get more people. So this is actually the impact of bad communication. And it's so easy to say it, but if you start looking at it from this perspective, it becomes clearly very quickly. So my question to myself a long time ago was, why is not your communication the highest priority to improve? And that's my question to you guys as young entrepreneurs and startups. Like, if you can improve your internal and your communication as a leader, then you'll improve a lot of other things simultaneously. So that's the perspective that I'm walking into here and that I want to give you. And now when you've heard me talking about it, now you're aware of it. So now we can start looking for it and searching for it and seeing it in yourselves and in your teams and all of that. Awareness is key here. Our brain focuses around thoughts that is repeated to it. We learn by repetition and we create habit by repetition. This becomes our autopilot. This becomes our first in mind. Said it before and I'll say it again because this is an important thing. How much to talk about what? And I like to see it as, don't fool your team with the future. Future is important. I mentioned that we're not going to talk about mission, vision, and stuff like that, but the future is important for startups. But don't fool your team with it. Any conversation you can have in life, especially in companies, you can categorize into three things. It's about the now, it's about the next, and it's about the future. It's wide, it's a bit fluffy, but however you want to do it in life, with love, with kids, with anything, you can categorize the conversation into these three categories. Now being a day to 1 month-ish, give or take. The next being 2 months to 6 months. And the future being 7 months to 3 to 5 years, depending on how long you like to look at the future in your company. I mean, 3 years is pretty long time for a startup. Anything can happen in 3 years, and especially if you're in tech. I mean, a coding language can live and die within 3 years. So the future is the future, and that's why I say 7 months and going. But what does this really mean? How much of this is what, and what has this to do with communication? My experience is this. We spend a small amount of time talking about the now in startups. And remember, I'm sitting now from a perspective where I'm stuck in the middle of a visionary founder and an operational organization I'm trying to run. But we don't talk about the now. We talk a little about, we talk sometime about the next, but we talk too much about the future. It's the visionary, it's the vision, it's the mission. We're going there. We can do this. We can found 16,000 different features that will solve the. There's a lot of conversations.
Often the investors are like pushing to like, where are you in 5 years or whatever, exactly. Right? So it's a lot about the future, yeah.
Which is great because future is important. But my role has always been, and every company has a person like this, should translate that into actually creating it. And then there's a time to understand when to not talk about the future, when to look at the now and the next, and don't care about the future, because there's a lot of nows and next before you're at the future. And that awareness came to me, and that helped me kind of filter through from the board, investors, the visionary founder, and then down in the organization. But I've also learned that leaders and founders and boards that has this perspective, that understands when to talk about what with whom, when they sit on that skill or that awareness, there's much less friction, there's much less confusion, because they understand when to look at what. And how can we translate this into something tangible for you guys? Well, our brain focuses around thoughts that is repeated to it. We learn by repetition and we create habits by repetition. This becomes our autopilot. Said it 3 times now, so hopefully you will remember it. What if your organization has the future first in mind instead of the now? So things get tough. things get stressful. The deadline moved from 3 months to 1 month. Oh, and people start going on autopilot because their pressure is on. And the autopilot is the future. Then we're just running in circles. Then we're actually not doing what needs to be done now to take us to the next step that will actually form the future. We can't jump those things. We can't jump from the now to the future. It's impossible. Time-wise, but also like productivity-wise. We need to do step 1, step 2, step 3. We can control how fast we do it, but we can't jump it. So that's why this is important. Don't fool your team with the future. Make them understand the future and know where we're going, but focus on what's here and now, what we can do to walk to the next step. And eventually you will be in the future. I think that perspective is very important. I see it like this. There's 3 levels. There's a strategic level, planning level, and implementation level. Board of directors, managers, strategic decisions, investor conversations, as Sebastian's saying. Yeah, let's talk 60% about the future. And let's talk about like 30% of the next. And don't talk too much about the now, because we should already have talking about it. It's okay to just spend and check up and understand, but it's where we're going. That's the strategic decisions. In the planning phase with team leads, roadmap planning, scoping, research, more into the operational part of the company. Yeah, we need to understand the future, but we only need to understand it. So 15%-ish, and spend more time on the next. Like, what are we working on now? And what's up next? Be ahead of the curve in the operational part, where now and next is actually the things that we're doing all the time. Future, that's just speculation. That's just hoping or seeing or forming strategies. It's not operational. And then in the implementation level, sprint planning, developers, marketing, customer success, yeah, you name it. Then we need to focus on the now. What are we doing now? And how does that translate into our next step? That's the most important things. And then, yeah, of course, the future is, they should also understand the future, but we don't need to take too much time to it. But we're just startup. We don't have board of directors. We don't have, yeah, it could be the same people in all of these 3 groups. But understanding, okay, what are we talking about now? Are we in a strategic meeting that we are going to talk about the future? Yeah. Are we in a planning meeting? Are we in a really like sprint planning? Now we're doing things. So no matter if we are 3 people or 53 people, these levels still apply, and the perspective of how much to talk about what becomes important. And yes, I have 60%, 30%. This is not science. This is just something I created and implemented in the organizations I've worked with. And it gave me a rough estimate on how much time are we spending on what. And it really helped us. You can define your own numbers. And that would be my next step here to make this even more tangible. Do this workshop. Spend an hour, spend 2, spend 3, spend 4, depending on how many people you are or how big you are, and answer 4 questions. Who is part of this group? How much time do we talk about what? When do we share this? And how do we share this? If you have the answers easily accessible for all 3 levels, then you're fine. And it's not a big work. It's not a big job. It's just setting some guidelines and some rules for you. It could look like this. On a strategic level, who is part? Board members, founders, C-level managers. We talk 10, 30, 60%. When do we share it? Full team every quarter. And when we onboard new employees, we share the strategy, we share the long time version, all of that. How much time do we take to share this? Presentation wise, max 30 minutes and 30 minutes Q&A. So that's basically 60 minutes every quarter and 60 minutes every time you onboard a new employee. That should be enough. If your company needs more, well, put in more. But if you have this written down, you have a pretty good actual operational guideline to work with. Planning phase, founders, C-level management, and mid-managers, if you would call it that. Here we talk about 30, 50, or 15%. These are the same percentage that I showed in the graph earlier. Managers every week. When do we share this? Full team every month. Okay, perfect. So once a week we do it, and every month we do it. Okay, that's not too many meetings. How do we show it? Yeah, example, we use the Jira roadmap. We have a 30-minute presentation, 30-minute. Okay, so that's 60 minutes a week and an extra 60 minutes per month for, that's okay. Then we know that, then that's our guideline. And implementation, you do the exact same thing. Here maybe like, how do we share it? Jira sprint planning tool, every sprint, all teams individually, all the time. Map this up, box it to a time that you feel is necessary for your organization and your size. Make it and stick to it. And when you grow, adapt it. If it doesn't work, change it. Use these 4 questions and these 3 levels, and you have a great actual kind of plan to work on.
What happens if you're like, if you haven't implemented like a Jira solution or equivalent? Like what's the quick hack? Can I just use an Excel sheet or like MS Paint?
Like, so in the planning phase, like whatever you use to plan your roadmap or your coming tasks. I mean, is it an Excel sheet? Is it the Gantt software? Is it a
Trello board? Almost.
I mean, whatever you use as a team, and you maybe start out with just using a board in your office, and then after a year you start implementing a software, but it doesn't matter, because this plan, like when do we share it, how much, and who is part, that's the important thing. And then how you share it, yeah, well, that could change, that could update, and yeah, that's dependent on how big you are and how fast you grow, so to speak. So don't get stuck in kind of in that pocket. That's not important, really. You can do a really good planning session for a really large company on a napkin if you're good at communicating.
yeah.
Documentary wise, maybe not that good, but understandment wise and alignment wise.
Yeah.
So alignment. I talked about this gap, the gap between your walk and your talk. So your walk being your behavior and your body language, and your talk being, what you're saying and what you actually are communicating. What does that even mean? 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and 7% words. That's actually our communication. Believe it or not. That's how we as human beings communicate. I can't remember his name, Maharibel. So 1967, a researcher found this in human communication, and it hasn't changed since 1967. Any studies, anything that's been doing up and from that time shows pretty much the same thing. So meaning we have 93% body language in our communication, which means that your walk weighs actually heavier than your talk. But from my perspective, it's the gap between your walk and your talk that weighs the heaviest. And why so? Look at it as a pyramid. Words at the top, vocals in the middle, and the non-verbal things in the middle. And vocals is your pitch, your how you sound. Are you talking slow? Are you talking high? All of these things, your dynamics. Non-verbal is how I move, how I sit. I sit like this, if I sit like this, which is more tangible when you're in the same room with energy, of course, but those 3 things. I see it like this. There's an intellectual alignment going on. People understand intellectually what you're saying, but not until they're emotionally aligned, they actually understand what you're saying. Because if you act in one way and talk about something else, and those the two things do not align, they will listen to what? Yes, the 93% part. So this is where the alignment word comes in again. To understand how to actually extract the 7% words is putting that gap between the intellectual and alignment. And how do we do that? The emotional alignment we have. Let's see it as authenticity. Are you who you are? Are you trying to be someone else? Are you putting on a charade? All of that. We have the transparency, like how good are you as a leader to be transparent with positives, with negatives, with struggles, with what you're trying to say? Or are you kind of trying to walking around a lot of things and trying to, are you twitching when you're like, are your emotions there? Are you believing in what you're saying or not? And honesty, I mean, how honest are you? Are you hiding things? Don't you want to express exactly what you feel or something like that? People sense this. This is body language. Yes, it's about what you're saying, but if people see you as an honest guy, is actually more about feelings than actually what you're saying. If they see you as a transparent person, yeah, that's actually more about body language than not. And are you authentic or not? Well, that's more about the alignment and the gap and body language than it is about your words. And then clarity here on the side. How clear are you when you're talking? Are you talking about 6 things at the same time? Or are you talking about one thing, making sure that's getting through, pause, talk about the next thing, and that's clear? But then we have the glue. How do we close this gap? Consistency. If your consistency are authentic and consistently clear, then you're going to get through to people. If you're consistently unauthentic, but still clear in your words, people will stop listening to you. If you're consistently unhonest or non-transparent, but super clear with your words, you will be attracted as an asshole. People will stop listening to you. So consistency is the glue to put your authenticity, your transparency, and honesty and clarity together. And this is what I call the catch framework. Clarity, authenticity, transparency, consistency, and honesty. And we can actually work with this as leaders. Now I've talked to you about it. Now you understand that there's emotional alignment and intellectual alignment, and there's a potential gap there in between. And the catch framework actually helps you identify gaps and stuff like that. And this is what I call the ingredients. So the ingredients is clarity, authenticity, transparency, consistency, and honesty. Each ingredient is treated by its own. You can be good at clarity. I can be great at not using access words, vocabulary, my vocals, great at presentations, good at fingering one point, whatever it is. But that's not what we're looking for. I can be a great authentic. I am me. Whoever I am, I can be me. But if you're not clear, but you're super authentic, you won't get through. And this loop kind of goes on. So I've formed the catch as a wheel, as a circle, and you grade it from 1 to 10 on each ingredient. And what you're looking for here is a wheel. See this as a wheel of life. There's an exercise in psychology that's called the wheel of life. And if you are unbalanced, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And just as in life, if if you're not satisfied with money and super satisfied with work and super unsatisfied in love, yeah, it's going to be a bumpy ride because it's not even. And the same goes here. If you're super clear, super dishonest, and extremely consistent about those things, it's going to be a bumpy ride. People won't listen to you. You'll have struggling getting through to your team. So take this chart, reflect over your balance, scale it from 1 to 10, and do this with yourself. Like, how honest am I in my conversations with my team? How clear am I actually? Do I have to repeat myself a lot? Do they understand me? Am I me, or am I trying to be someone that doesn't really resonate with what I believe in? Am I transparent? Am I consistent? Scale yourself. You can also take the same chart, give it to your team, and have them scale you, or have them scale you as a management group even. And then you can see, okay, this is how I see it, or this is how our management group sees us as a group, and this is how our team sees. Okay, there's inconsistencies. Okay, then you have something to work on. Strive for the wheel. You don't need to have 10s everywhere. That's not, well, you shouldn't have ones, only ones either, but you should strive for the wheel. Like, it's okay if you're not super honest all the time as a leader, but as long as you're transparent, consistency and authenticity and clarity and honesty is kind of in the same range, you'll have so much easier to get through to your team. And yeah, and people will follow you and listen to you as a leader. Remember, that's what we do. People needs to follow us.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful. On the topic, let's say I have bad news. We're running out of money. I need to fire half of the team, but I'm not sure yet, because I might get the new investments in a week, and I need the team to be focused, right? So then I'm not 100% transparent. Neither am I honest when I smile in the office and like, yeah, let's keep the grind going. Like, that's awesome. High five someone or whatever, right? Like, where do you, sometimes 10 on everything is not like ideal or optimal, or could you just speak on that for a second?
I mean, every rule has an exception, and the best kind of explanation I can do is, if I want to lose weight, can I eat the pizza? Of course you can. It's not about if you eat the pizza once in a while, it's that you don't eat pizza every day. And this is the same thing. Like, that's a strategic decision. And I've been in that situation myself where, okay, there's no money. Oh, it came money just in time before everything broke. And how do you keep your teams to not start updating their CVs and stuff? Transparency and honesty doesn't necessarily always need to be upfront. I mean, saying that, yeah, this is a startup, we're now in fundraising, we are looking for more money because we're in a position where we need to do that, doesn't necessarily need to worry your team. But then afterwards, when it comes in and you move funded for another 3 years, you can be transparent and honest. Well, we were 1 month from bankruptcy, and we solved it like this. We did, and that's transparency and that's honesty. And you will come across as a Rico guy or girl, because you're transparent and honest. It doesn't always need to be upfront. But if you would never mention that again, just put it under a pillow and walk by, and then you're super dishonest and non-transparent. So I would see it like that.
Yeah. So Ferran, no worries. You can jump out. We'll, as I mentioned, we'll save the recordings and share it internally afterwards. So no worries. let's kick on. We have a couple of minutes before the Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm almost at the end here. And
yep,
as I said, like, strive for the wheel, kind of try to even it out. And there's going to be situations, especially in startups, where you need to be, just as Sebastian said, strategically not tell things to your team at this moment. You need to kind of not worry people. You need to strategically manage things. But that doesn't mean that should always be like that. You can always recover from something like that. Just as I said, like, afterwards, be transparent in what we walk through as a company. I didn't want to worry you and stuff like that. And that's where the fourth point comes in. Like, keep working on this. Okay, I weren't super clear last month. I was bad. Okay, I need to get those numbers up again. And I've been super good at transparency, but I've lost my clarity in that. I'm so transparent that I'm now unclear instead. So you constantly need to kind of look at these ingredients and see, just as food. Yep. If you've made a great soup and it stands for 3 days, it's going to taste more. Do you need to put some more chili or more salt in it, or do you need to even it out with some cream to get the salt? It's the same thing. So get back to it. Keep working on it. If you don't, everything will just slowly increase.
It's like a muscle, right?
It's definitely like a muscle. So our brain focuses around thoughts that is repeated to it. We learn by repetition and we create habits by repetition. This becomes our autopilot and our first in mind. So again, train, repeat. What is clarity for me? What is honesty? Am I the person who I want to be? Who do I want to be as a leader? Who am I as a leader? Close that gap. Repeat, train. It's a muscle. But don't be afraid of repetition. And this is kind of my final point here, that I hear so many times. Frustrated founders, frustrated. We've already talked about this. We talked about this 2 years ago. Yes, but that we're still talking about it means that we need to keep it fresh. If we still need to talk about it and we haven't gone past it, well, then you're not clear. But repetition is not bad. Repetition is how you form habits for your team. If you are consistent in certain things, in how you show certain things, strategics, how you share information, people get comfortable with that and don't need to put their energy in, oh, where should it come from next? They can put their energy into being productive instead. But be aware of what you are repeating. How, what, and when. A quick little summary. What have we talked about today? The impact of your communication, the perspective. Understand the power. Understand the ups and downs of communication, the good, the bads. How much to talk about what? Do that workshop. Put that quick guidelines for yourself. Box it within an hour if you need. And the impact of the gap between your walk and your talk. Make sure people listen to you. The easiest way is to be the person who you want to be and form that towards what leadership is for you, and understand all these small ingredients. Use the catch framework as a help to kind of bring that through. Do it super easy. Again, if you're a small organization, time cap it, box it, do it, just repeatedly come back to it. And you can take the catch system how far you want. But that's for another session, and I can have a full 45 minutes only talking about catch in the future. Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Hope that brings you something into your toolbox to when you start growing your team, and if you already maybe have grown your team. Follow me on LinkedIn, Daniel Ekstam. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me and follow me, and ask me any questions you like. I'm super happy to just send me a message and I'll do my best to support you. My personal email is there also. Just send me an email if there's anything. I'm super happy to answer questions or do anything or give you more material on these topics or anything like that.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Daniel. And if anyone wants an introduction, I'd be happy to connect you. So you can ping me too, if that's easier. So we have a couple of more minutes on the Q&A. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that presentation. When you're talking, I'm at each step of the road, I'm like reflecting on my own leadership and how I behave. And there's like this clear walk versus talk gap that I have in my everyday life that I can't ignore every time I hear you talk about it. It's like I sort of obviously care a lot about people's time and respect other people's time. However, I have such issues getting into time, coming into time, and being in time to certain meetings, right? And there's a huge gap between what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, everyone needs to be in time. Let's keep the agenda. And then I'm slaughtering the meetings. I'm coming in late, and then I have tons of questions that are like way beyond or like side notes of the actual meeting. So I try to think a lot about like how I personally, as a leader, close that gap between that I'm saying that I care about people's time, but I'm actually also disciplining myself and being in time. And if I'm not, really have a good communicate with transparency why and avoid it going forward.
I mean, everyone has a gap.
Yeah.
Everyone has a gap. It's just about identifying where the gaps are and how big of an impact they have.
Yeah.
I mean, that gap, yeah, for some people, that's an extremely hard gap for people to accept. But for some people, it doesn't matter. And it's about your organization. How does that gap kind of impact your organization?
Yeah.
And so that's the only conversation you need to have with yourself.
Yeah.
You can close the gap on everything, but is it time well spent? Well, you need to see what actually goes on.
However, as long as the team knows that I'm really working on it. And really good. So just feel free to raise your hands or jump in, unmute yourself if you have a question. I'm gonna just quickly trigger the survey. So feel free to, you should be, let's see here. You should be able to see the survey now. So please go ahead and answer those questions while we cover the last part of the Q&A. So feel free to jump in if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to start with one of the things that I've been thinking about during your session. You talked about that there's too much talk about the future. Sometimes the only way, because when you're in a startup, like it's way more drama, it's way more, the volatility is higher, it's higher risk, you often have to work longer hours, and it's like really tough work, and you're probably not paid on market-based levels, right? You probably get options or shares in the company that you're working on. The way to incentivize that and motivate people is to talk about the future, right? So when what is enough, and like obviously the future is such an important part. You get my question, like where do you draw the line?
I mean, and I think that's kind of a mindset, and as I said, there's a place and a time for everything. Like in all of these three levels, there was always a future part. So never take that out, but understand that if you talk about the future every day, if you talk about the future in planning your roadmap, then it's yes, but okay, we have a business case that requires X, Y, Z, and that needs to be technically in place before we can start making money or making traction on whatever is important for your startup to scale. But if we always talk about the future, like, yeah, we can do this, we can be here, we should do this, you forget about the things that kind of, yes, but this, and this needs to be on place. This needs to work flawlessly before we can add on. And I think that's the risk, and understanding on when to talk about what. The perfect example is, so if there's a product that the business case is to generate money on the users' kind of activity in the platform, then you need to get people into the platform. And then you can start generating money on that. So, but if you start on working on and talking about the money generation things, and then we can add on this, and we can put in betting, and we can put in G's and highs, and we can put in playgrounds or whatever. But if you haven't technically and business-wise solved the puzzle of to get people there and to get people to stay to monetize on them, this other crap doesn't matter. And that's the risk. Like, when do we talk about the future? Should we understand, or should we constantly reiterate the future? No, you should understand it and then working on getting us there. And then in the strategic level, then we can reiterate and new ideas and awesome things and blah, blah, blah. So
awesome things and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, so I think that's the lesson there. And that's the perspective, that there's a time and a place. And that's the most important, to understand when and where.
Yep.
And with who.
Yeah.
I mean, a developer who sits and develops a lot, that's kind of an introvert, to kind of generalize, he doesn't need to be stuffed with the future every day.
Yeah, he or she. Yeah.
Sorry.
And that makes perfect sense. I was thinking about, I'm going to just keep going, and feel free to raise your hand or jump in if you have any questions. Feel free to just click unmute. So in your line of work and being this communicator and seeing the organizations, and we work together and seen organizations where there's a huge gap between people executing and the vision of and the mission of the company. What have you seen? What are the early warning signals that one should look for when you mentioned one, for example, like if you get same questions over and over and over, like what could you get a little bit more concrete of, like what are the warning signals that you've seen if your internal comms is not on par or have areas of improvement?
I think a warning signal that kind of becomes very clear to me is frustration from the visionary part, when you have the same conversation with a person that's in a visionary type of person, and the frustration comes out. That's a warning signal, because they haven't got their point across, or they thought that this should already be done, or something similar. But other things is, if you change a lot, like now we're going to now this is important, and then next week, oh, this is important, oh, now this is important, then there's something fundamentally not working in the communication of the three areas. Like, this is the strategically where we want to go, this is how we think or believe we can get there, and this is what we need to do now to start moving in that direction. If those three levels, like strategic planning and implementation, are not well communicated, then you switch a lot. Then context switching is a real issue. And I know you mentioned before, to put kind of an answer to an unasked question is, but we're startups, we need to be iterative. Yes, iterative and context switching are not the same thing. Context switching is, oh, let's try this business case and do full into this feature. Oh, let's try this feature and full, without understanding what impact it has to our broader goal. But being iterative is, okay, we believe this and this and this will take us to the next level. Okay, let's try this. Understand, it didn't work. Okay, then let's try this. There's still a plan in being iterative, but just context switching is confusion. And so those are kind of the two warning signals I look for. Even within myself, like if I have that conversation with someone and I feel, okay, now I'm getting frustrated because now I have to have this conversation again, then I know, okay, I have not done my job in communicating this well.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. I think that's helpful in I can see many situations where that would be useful for me,
yeah,
as a leader. And it, like, as you're sort of figuring out, trying to get product market fit, trying to get those sales, trying to get the user growth going, you have to experiment, right?
yeah,
And what you're saying basically is like, yes, it's okay to experiment as long as you understand why you're doing certain experiments and keep aligning on like what are the actual goals of those. That makes sense. Yeah.
and I mean, there's always, and you're not always right, and that should be okay. You always do mistakes. So it's just about like understanding, okay, oh, here it didn't go well, even in your communication, but also in your kind of execution of your believed path towards success. I think that's an important kind of aspect of also communication, that understanding, like, and then we're into empathy and these things about leadership, which is important as well. But again, it starts with your communication as a leader, and everyone is a leader. And I think that's also an important point. Like, if you have a team of, if you're more than 2 people, you have communication issues in an organization. To quote Katarina Berg, the head of HR at Spotify, if you're more than 2 people, you have communication issues. So it's relevant to everyone from my perspective.
Good. We are out of time. And again, I want to thank you, Daniel, for sharing your insights with us. And thanks for Stockholm Scale Up Program and Scania Friends for tuning in. We'll be sharing this and uploading it into the platform afterwards. And we'll be doing IP rights. We're going to talk about how to build teams in extreme growth. We're going to talk about OKRs and goal setting. There's a couple of more interesting workshops coming up. Thanks so much. And I'll see you on the other side and the fireside chat that would trigger. So if anyone wants to tune in, you can watch us on our socials afterwards. Good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.